So, Jason, when we get to the recruiting here, you've got an interesting bit of a sidebar regarding a pretty high-level recruit who may turn out to be a walk-on to be able to accomplish what he wants to get done.
Yeah, it's such an interesting story, Mark. I mean, and I think it's a good story for this day and age when we talk about, when we talk so much about the role that NIL is playing in recruiting and just the dirty business of recruiting that we see. So, I think it had been widely speculated, wondering which happens when any coach comes over, I think, from another school, who's that coach going to bring with him, who's committed, maybe not necessarily as much to the school as they are to that coach that recruited them. So, and it happens everywhere. But I think one of the things that Venables had come out and talked about last week was that he felt like it was not ethical. He felt like it was not becoming of a head coach at a major university to basically pick apart another school's recruiting class. So he had made the decision, and I know he had talked to Dabo Swinney about this on multiple occasions. He had made the decision he was not going to actively or even inactively, I guess, proactively, however you want to say it, try to recruit any of the kids from Clemson over to Oklahoma. So there was a kid by the name of Jaren Kanak who had been committed to Clemson and had been committed to Brent Venables for quite some time. 4-star linebacker, he's really an athlete. He's kind of rated as an athlete on 247, but really projects to more to be a linebacker he was committed to Clemson, and then on National Signing Day, he did not sign. So much as in the 247, hard commits that Clemson had 13, they only had 12 signed. Dabo Swinney talked about this was going to be the 12 that they were going to have. So a lot of some of the crystal balls kind of started coming in for Oklahoma, and then on the back half of that, Venables kind of talking about what he's doing. So a lot of people didn't know where that would leave him. But earlier this week, it was reported that Kanak is in the Oklahoma Sooner database, so he is an early enrollee, but has not necessarily signed a letter of intent with Oklahoma. And he's not come out and said anything. Venables is obviously he can't comment about it at this point, given that he's not necessarily a signed with Oklahoma. So I think that the thought is here that he is going to be he's going to be a walk-on for Oklahoma until at which point he's given a scholarship. And I think there's a couple of ways to kind of think about this. First and foremost, when you're a 4-star kid, it's a little bit different than like a Baker Mayfield, right? That has, he didn't really have a whole lot. He walked on at Texas Tech, didn't have a whole lot of high profile scholarship opportunities, whereas this kid's a 4-star guy, one of the best rated athletes in the country at the prep level. So he was going to get scholarship offers almost anywhere he wanted to go. So I think it'll him deciding to walk on and just he wants to be at OU, wants to play for Venables so bad that he's willing to walk on. I think he'll probably walk on initially. I think it'll almost force Venables' hand at this point. Like, okay, you want to be here that bad. I guess we'll have to. Okay, you twist the minor arm. We'll have to offer you a scholarship. So I think it's just really. It's such a cool story. I think from my perspective, just knowing that a player wants to play for an individual coach so bad that he's willing to walk on and really just kind of take the risk, there maybe not a ton of risk, but we're willing to take the risk of, okay, I want to play here so bad. I'm just going to go in and roll and force him to and force the school to give me a scholarship. So I think it's a cool, and it's going to be a cool story. And it's a position of need for Oklahoma. And so the ability to have him in early, compete in the spring will be big for Oklahoma, just kind of moving forward. I don't know if I've ever heard. I don't know that I've ever heard a story like this for as highly ranked of a kid that he is.
Absolutely. It is an interesting story, and he's taking the situation into his own hands to pursue what he would like and where he would like to be. So I think that's generally a good thing. So that shows his level of determination and so forth.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, it kind of talks to. I think it kind of talks to the type of person that Venables is. I mean, I think he's bringing a different level of professionalism that maybe Oklahoma hasn't necessarily had since since Bob left. I mean, point blank, talking to people, Lincoln wasn't the most liked person among, not necessarily among his colleagues, not necessarily among his players, but just just in general. So I think that what Venables brings to the position isn't something that Oklahoma's had in a while, and I think you're seeing the evidence of this early on in this 2022 cycle, because he was able, along with some of the guys that were there previously, like Kel Gundy, Bill Beadenbow, DeMarco Murray, kind of helping keeping the wheels on the bus for some of these guys. But Kobe McKenzie is a name that Oklahoma fans are very familiar with. He's a kid that had been committed to Oklahoma for a couple of years, decommitted, committed to Texas, and then Venables had an in-home and recommitted to Oklahoma pretty much right away. And he's been as vocal of a kid that I've seen on the recruiting trail in quite some time. He has there's a lot of Oklahoma people who have been very active on Twitter. Oklahoma Twitter is probably one of the most active that there is in college football, and there's a lot of these guys that have been on some of these Twitter spaces over, and a lot of these are led by fans, and some of these are led by people that have kind of insight into the program, some of the beat writers. And Kobe McKenzie's a guy that has been in some of these conversations, and he's been very vocal about bringing some kids along with him. So there's about 6 or 7 guys that he has been very instrumental in kind of helping recruit to Oklahoma. So there's about 6 or 7 guys, not even necessarily counting the Kanak kid, that Oklahoma's in the mix on, in terms of in some of this late period. Just a couple of names to throw out there. 2 big names from the offensive line side. Cam Dewberry he's a guy that actually has committed to A&M. I think it's going to be interesting whether or not he will be let out of his LOI, because he signed a letter of intent. Then afterwards, in his name's, I think the last name is Henson, the A&M offensive line coach had moved on after that. So I don't know if that would be enough to let him out of the letter of intent for A&M, but certainly a guy, if he is let out of that intent, that Oklahoma would be very, very interested in, and Oklahoma was in the mix with him. Devon Campbell, who's a 5-star offensive lineman, it looks like he's might be trending Oklahoma's way, and Javante Barnes is a running back out of Las Vegas that DeMarco Murray has been really been in there with him. Decided that he wasn't going to sign early, wanted to announce it at the All-Star game. Is another guy. Ahmad Moten is another 4-star defensive lineman there. So there's about 5 or 6 that Oklahoma's real. I mean, there's a few more that aren't as haven't went as far, just in terms of that kind of that recruit visit relationship just yet. But I think it just kind of shows it shows a couple of things. Oklahoma is moving about as far away from this speed D that they've kind of went, the moniker of Grinch. I think, he's Venables has talked about having bigger, stronger guys on the defensive line, specifically in the defensive tackle position. So I think they're going away with that a little bit. A little bit more. So Oklahoma's still setting at the number 10 spot. Wouldn't be surprised, if they can get some of these guys, they could end up in the top inside the top 10 before this is over. And if that's the case, it's just a massive win for Oklahoma and for Venables to come in as late as he did and be where he's at, and then being able to still bring in a top 10 class is really just, I think, just remarkable, and shows to how good of a recruiter that he is. He was, like we talked about, he was a good recruiter at Oklahoma. I think he's just learned so much about coaching and all the intricacies of college football under being a head coach, being prepared for that, for exactly what he needed to be prepared for under Swinney for as long as he was. So I think it's only going to get better from a recruiting perspective, especially when they get those, when they get his entire coaching staff in here.
In a sense, you can liken it to being a salesperson in that you could take anyone, a number of people, not anyone, but anybody who's a reasonable professional, they're a good communicator, they understand and have a knowledge of their product, whatever that is as a salesperson, or in this case, a recruiter. They know what they're selling, in quotes. They're good communicators. They can build relationships. They're friendly. They're likable. You can put that person out there, and you find this out in the sales world, that person can do a great job through like 90% of what needs to be done in contacting people, building the relationship, being friendly, likable, conveying all the information in a very clear way, and doing all that. But then there's something to closing. There's something to having the skills and abilities, whether that's innate or you learn it and enhance it, the art of closing. And a lot of people are good at all the other things. And they're very capable people, but it takes a certain kind of person, or certain kind of person, just because they've learned it, on how to then, when push comes to shove and the rubber meets the road, can ask the right questions, make the right statements to take that person from, hey, I really like you and I like this university and I like your football program and you're under consideration, to, okay, I'm going to commit to Oklahoma.
Yeah, and I think what I think he's bringing, Mark, is the overall value of the Oklahoma brand. I think one of the strategies that Riley deployed, and it may be more of a strategy that I don't follow national recruiting as much as I do Oklahoma and just the area here. But I think Oklahoma in the past has really just kind of floated around offers like like it's not a whole lot of thought in the evaluation and who you're offering. And I think one of the things that Venables said early on was that he wanted an offer from Oklahoma to these kids to mean something. So they were going to, do more evaluation versus offering so many kids. So, and I think part of it, you're going to see a renewed effort in the state of Oklahoma recruiting. I think he wants kids that really want to be at Oklahoma. And I think when you have kids that really want to be at a school versus they want to use the school as a conduit to their next destination, I think it helps from a team perspective, and knowing that you have a guy that will be there, that will help you get to the next level, but also you also have a guy that cares about you personally, and then wants you to be at this school, have some pride and have some ownership of being at that school. So I think it's an interesting idea. I hope it's one of those that really works out, and maybe getting an offer from Oklahoma will start to mean a little bit more, and they'll get more of the kids that just really want to be in Oklahoma.
Jim Tressel, when he was at Ohio State, made a similar comment about recruiting Ohio players. And you can take this to an extreme. And of course, that program would not, and this program would not just grab a bunch of 2-stars in state just thinking they're going to try so hard. Of course, you can take it to, you have to have a certain level of talent on the field. But the thought that if, and he actually stated it, that, yeah, we are going to recruit nationally, but we're going to be very selective, because there is something to be said of recruiting a player. And I'll move the example from Ohio into Oklahoma. Recruiting, let's say, a kid in Ohio or in Oklahoma versus going somewhere else, just having a thought that when it's late in the fourth quarter against Texas or Oklahoma State and it's a difficult situation, there's adversity, there's a grind, there's just something else that needs to be down deep to push you across the finish line to get it done. Or maybe that's the extra rep in the weight room in March or whatever that is, that if you get somebody who maybe has loved this school, this program, this university since childhood, or has a great and deep affection for it, that they're going to do a little bit more that's going to push your team across the finish line when adversity strikes.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, Ethan Downs is a perfect example. He's a guy that's probably going to get into the mix a little bit more on the defensive line now with some of those guys out. And he's a guy that, he's an Oklahoma kid. He's talked about, it was his dream. It was always his dream to attend the University of Oklahoma. And, for a true freshman, he played quite a bit in a rotational perspective. But I think he'll probably be one of the guys that are the starters. Not only this next season, this next game, but the next season as well. So, I think it's a different. I think it's not only a different mindset, but I think it's a different approach. I think for Venables versus Riley, it was well documented that Riley was more of a CEO type of a head coach. He was interested in the product on the field, not as much interested in kind of developing those personal relationships with some of those kids. So I think Venables will be a little bit more of the opposite, more dedicated to maybe not salvaging, but flourishing in some of those personal relationships with the kids. I mean, he's a very tough, hard-nosed coach, and I think he's always going to be that way. And it's evidenced by bringing Jerry Schmidt in from Texas A&M, who's going to he's a no nonsense type of a strength and conditioning coach. But at the same time, I think hearing some of these things from the players on, are they excited? Are they, nervous? Because there's a lot of horror stories out there about, some of his workouts from previous years. So I think a lot of them are not necessarily have the mindset, we're not necessarily looking forward to it, but we're looking forward to what it's going to bring come Saturday. So I think you'll definitely see that a lot of that transition from the recruiting side to the field, where you're going to see, I think you're going to see a team that Oklahoma people are going to like watching a little bit more from a toughness perspective, from a from an assignment perspective, being a better tackling team, and just all of that kind of goes along with being a tougher, more disciplined football team, and so that will like I said, I think that will manifest itself from the recruiting side of it all the way to the play on the field.